Hi, I'm Jennifer Sir. Welcome to the Sewing Room and our Jobs in Fashion series. Today we're talking with Julianne Brown, who is one of our instructors for fashion design as well as fashion illustration. She is an amazing illustrator, but more than that, she's a great instructor. And prior to instructing and being a teacher, she worked as a swimwear designer for over 25 years. So today we're going to talk about the job of fashion designer and what that means. Without further ado, here's Julianne Brown. Welcome to the Sewing Room and our Jobs in Fashion series. I'm so happy you're here today to talk with us about being a fashion designer.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Tell us a little bit about your journey and what you're doing now.
Oh, well, it's been a long journey. So I am a former fashion designer, so I no longer design because my specialty was swimwear, and I designed swimwear for 25 years, which was long enough. And I always wanted to teach, and I had done my swimwear career in Southern California. But I moved to Northern California to be closer to my parents and enjoy some time with them, which brought me up here to the Bay Area, which is where I met you. And I am excited to be teaching as part of the Sewing Room's Fashion Studies program, because I think it's really exciting to work with the next generation in creating garments and being a part of that. It's really exciting for me.
We're totally lucky to have you.
Thank you.
How did you get started as a swimwear designer?
Randomly. So when I was a junior in college, I went to Otis. It was Otis Parsons when I entered, but it became Otis College of Art and Design by the time that I graduated. I had always taken freelance jobs as an illustrator, and I got an illustration job for a swimwear company. And so this is before computers. I mean, computers were just starting to come in. I had, I think, 2-week course on computers before I graduated. Really just threw us in and tried to prepare us. Anyway, companies used to present their work by having someone draw it on a figure in the prints and patterns that they were offering things in. And so I got a job for a swimwear company doing that, presentation boards. And I did that all summer through my junior year. I worked with them through my senior year. And so when I graduated, I wasn't planning to go into swimwear. I had prepared 2 portfolios, one for children's wear and the other one for costuming, because I thought I was either going to take one of those paths. Strangely, I took neither, because as soon as I graduated, the company offered me a position in design, and how could I say no? So I I said yes, and I became an assistant designer at a swimwear company. So it's just, luck, happenstance. I was very open-minded, I suppose, to take that path.
How many places or jobs did you have before you were considered a senior designer?
Okay, let me just say that my career is not normal in the way that it transgressed, because at that swimwear company, the senior designer became pregnant shortly after I started working there, and she was training me to be a designer. I literally happened to be in the right place at the right time. I took over her position when she took her pregnancy leave, and she never came back.
Wow.
So I became the senior designer because I was there, and I showed, that I had the right talent, or, could do the work. I mean, it really, you have to show the work. You don't just get that kind of job because you're there. You have to have the merit, you have to merited the job. But yeah, so strangely, that never happens. Like I don't think that I mean, that could still happen today, right? If you're in the right place at the right time, but that's a very unusual path. So my first job was working for an import company, which was a great first learning place to be because we had office in LA, but we were a small company under 10 people, and all of our sample room was in Korea and our production was in Indonesia. So I learned the whole process of tech packs and spec making and doing everything by measurement. It was a great learning experience for me as a first designer.
And did you travel to Korea and Indonesia?
I traveled to Korea twice a year to oversee the samples being made. Yes. I really enjoyed that. I never went to Indonesia. They were having a coup at the time. So it was unsafe for me to travel there. So I never made it there, but I understand it's a very beautiful place to visit.
And was that the only company that you worked for, or did you work for other swimwear companies as well?
Yeah, so I only worked for one other company. One of my frustrations about working import is we didn't have, it was a very long timeline. So I didn't have a sample room that I could see my samples being made. It would take several weeks for me to see a first sample. And so I really wanted to work for a company who had that capability of a sample room and who worked locally with local contractors. That's something I wanted. I just wanted, different kind of experience and something that gave me more creativity. So the price point that I was working at with the import company was very low. So it meant the designs were a little more basic. And so I got a little bored. I wasn't very challenged. And I really wanted, I had my eye on another company that I had admired for a while because they were doing really exciting things over there and they were local and they sewed local. And so when they advertised for a position, I jumped at the chance to do that. So I ever only worked for two companies, which is also unheard of in my industry, in fashion in general, because usually people bounce around here and there. But it was a woman-owned company, and I just loved the environment that they had created for women to have agency. And so I stayed for 20 years at that company.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it is.
Well, speaking of doing the work, you talked about that a little bit. What does a typical day in the life of a fashion designer look like?
Okay, so everything is calendared. You live your entire life by the calendar because there are development calendars that you need to have your lab dips done for your solid fabrics or your prints colored up and printed, whoever's printing your prints. There's always development happening at the same time that you are fitting previous production things that have been released. So you're always developing at the same time that you're overseeing things that you've already developed. So it's a constantly moving cycle. So the goal of every day is to stay on calendar. It's a very deadline driven business. And luckily there are more organized people than me who helped me stay on calendar. So I had a design development person who would come to me and say, your lab dips are due this week, and so that kind of thing. So it's always fitting. A lot of my day was spent fitting. Sometimes I would meet with art studios and look at art, purchase art. So every company is kind of different because the next company that I worked for, it was more of a medium-sized company. So when I was hired there as a designer, I had a lot of control over my own brand. So it was also called a licensing company. They specialized in swimwear. So other brands would come to us, our company, and want to create swimwear with their label on it. And so that was the strength of our company. We did that. So my job was working with different brands, developing their swimwear keeping their brand identity. So it was very important for me to understand who they were selling to, what their brand looked like, um, what their customer expected as far as quality and fit. And so most of my days were spent, creating for those brands. And so I had a lot of control, meaning I could buy my own artwork, I could recolor it myself, I could choose my own solid colors, as long as it was keeping with the brand. And then you would meet with that brand occasionally throughout the year to make sure that you were staying on track and that your ideas met with their creative director's ideas of their, identity, and so that we were always on the same page.
Did you have any favorite brands to work with?
I do actually. So I launched Betsy Johnson's swimwear collection. I think it was 2007, and I worked with her for 7 years.
Wow.
And that was a favorite of mine because I had been a longtime admirer and customer of Betsy Johnson, and she always had a vintage vibe, which I adored because I love vintage clothing, and I like to look back at vintage clothing for references and design ideas. So we meshed very well. I very much enjoyed working with her. And once I established my rapport with her, she was pretty hands off with me. She trusted me, which is the ultimate compliment, that she didn't have to check on me very much because I was doing exactly what she had expected for her brand, because I got it. I was that customer. So that was an easy click. I've had to do some brands that may not have been my personal style, but that's part of being kind of a chameleon, is being able to research and understand who those people are so that you could design for it anyway. So I wouldn't say that Lucky Brand jeans was my personal, aesthetic, but it didn't matter. I actually really enjoyed working for that label as well.
What a fantastic experience to have.
Thank you. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to put on those different hats and try to think about all those different customers out there.
So what is the role of a fashion designer in a larger company versus a smaller company?
Right. So because I worked for a small company, you're steering the ship and you have a lot of decision making to do. So because you're developing the product, you're the creative person, you have to have the answers for that product. So if something went to the costing department and it ended up being too expensive, they would come to me and I would have to help solve that. I help solve construction issues in the sewing room. I would help, I would direct my pattern makers into the styling of a garment, where exactly I wanted a style line, or if I needed a specific measurement of something. So whenever you create something, you have to have the entire kind of, you have to have the answers for it. You are the director of the ship, in other words. Now, when you work for a big company, usually there's someone above you being the director for the ship. They are making sure that everything is going smoothly with all of the working parts of all the production and pre-production schedules and development. And their job is also usually to oversee the brand and all the calendaring for that company. So it kind of depends. Like I worked for a specialty company, swimwear, right? That was my category. But there are large sportswear companies out there who you just may be a blouse designer for that company, or a dress designer. And above you, you have a creative director, usually telling you your color stories, your prints that you're going to use. You usually don't get to make those decisions on your own. When you work for a smaller company, you're a little more nimble and you can take on those roles of making those decisions. And that's what I wanted. I knew that's what I wanted. I mean, I worked in LA. I could have worked for a sportswear company for juniors. I knew I didn't want that. I didn't want those hours. They work endlessly, sadly, into the night a lot of times. And I wanted a slower pace. So luckily, that's why I stayed with swim, because I realized that it was a much different experience than a lot of my friends were having in fast fashion.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
How are the styles determined from season to season?
Great question. So sometimes stores will send you sales reports. So literally what is selling at their stores. So one of my jobs is to read those sales reports every Monday. And I would take that information in and decide like, oh, bandos aren't selling very well. I better switch to something else. Oh, or this other thing is just flying off the shelves. This thing everyone loves. So you want to repeat your successes, capitalize on your successes and let go of the dogs or the ones that are just hitting the sales rack, right? No one's buying them. So you're always taking that into consideration from year to year. And I watched your interview with Meg, and it reminded me of like middle America versus the coasts, and
Right.
how people are more progressive. And it takes a while to get to the juicy center of America for those styles to kind of trickle in and be accepted. And so sometimes that means that you repeat a style and bring it forward so that they can embrace it too. It just is a slight delay there sometimes. So yeah, you're always you want to offer something for everyone. But it also depends on like the position of your company. So our company tended to be more fashion driven, leading the fashion edge as opposed to following it. So it
Mhm.
also depends on where your company's positioned in the market as to like who you're selling to and what they're ready for.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, were you ever involved in any of the photo shoots or fashion shows with your swimwear?
I love photo shoots. So photo shoots evolved with the internet. Originally, we used to do photo shoots for what we would call lookbooks, which are um, it's a printed reference of your line shown on a model that you would give to magazines so they could choose which items they would want to feature in their upcoming editorial stories. But eventually, everyone wanted models shown on plain backgrounds to put on the internet. So when we would sell to some of our customers, they would say, "Oh, do you have, your internet pictures, your white background photos?" So we learned to have both of those. So we would do it in the same photo shoot. You'd have like more lifestyle jumping around, like with backgrounds and interesting kind of vibe and feel of your brand. And then you would also have the front and back very kind of boring job for the model to just stand there very kind of still and then turn around and show the back of every garment that you are producing. So
More
um,
of a catalog.
yeah, exactly. It is exactly a catalog. But I loved working with photographers and makeup artists, and I'm also directing that. I was always there at the shoots because if I hand the swimwear to somebody else and this has happened, they might put it on upside down.
Oh my goodness.
They might put that bra on upside down. So you're there as the designer to make sure that the product looks right and that it's worn right and that the model doesn't wear it too low or too high, or that it is photographed how it was intended.
That's really funny.
In our company, so we did have our own brand in our company. It wasn't mine. There was our design director had her own brand, and she would have a fashion show every year at Miami, and so I would be a part of that, backstage dressing models, making sure everyone looked right. I was always the person who did the hand sewing for a fitting. If something didn't fit someone, I would make sure that that garment fit that person, so I would be up the night before the show doing a little hand stitching. So yeah, fashion shows are fun. They're a lot of work for a very small amount of
Very
presentation
small
time.
amount of time, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing, but fun to be a part of. And I used to go to the shows. Like Betsy would invite me to the shows in New York to see her shows, and I just adored that. That was a fun experience.
That's really exciting.
Yeah.
That's really exciting. So We know that you're instructing fashion design and fashion illustration at the sewing room, but do you do
Yeah.
any other freelance work?
I do. So I still do a little recoloring of prints. I love colors. I love working on colors. So you can see this print back here on my dress form. That is a dress, an old Betsy dress, and that came in a couple colorways. So I would change those in the computer. I still do that for companies here and there because it still kind of keeps my toe in the water of fashion, being a part of it, but not really making product anymore. And then I have always been a freelance illustrator. Back from when I was in college till now, I have always said yes to illustration jobs because I love to draw. And I love to draw, all kinds of things, but especially women and people wearing clothing and fun, fun ways to show fashion. So I have usually get my jobs through word of mouth. And so all of my freelance jobs around here in the Bay Area have been through meeting new friends here. So I did an illustration for All Things Vintage and Memento Moda, which is, local businesses. And
Mhm.
I'll probably continue to do that. I think when people see that I draw, they see it on my Instagram, then they ask me and I usually say yes. So that's how that works.
They're very lucky to get you, let me tell you.
Ah, thank you.
Well, thank you, Julianne, for giving us a little bird's eye view of what it's like to be a fashion designer.
Yeah,
And
welcome.
I really appreciate you being here today.
Thank you. It was fun. It was fun to talk about it.